He let his wife die to save his lover, and the neighborhood still smelled like coffee and regret. The sentence landed like a verdict long before any court convened. The kitchen light hummed, the kettle clicked twice and then remained quiet, and the thin mattress in the guest room had the faint odor of detergent mixed with sweat. Neighbors spoke in low voices on their porches. The same street that had once traded recipes now traded suspicion. She clutched the sheet at the edge of the bed, fingers white, and said with a voice that trembled and then broke, "I cannot breathe, Daniel." Outside, a delivery scooter rattled past, and a dog barked 3 times as if to keep time with the panic. Someone at the gate shouted for an ambulance, someone else whispered about an affair, and a torn hospital receipt fluttered from a pocket like a small accusing flag. The promise was spoken like a shadow. There would be records, messages, a transfer, a laudo that would not lie. In the next minutes, secrets would become evidence, and the quiet staircase of their building would turn into a tribunal of rumor. Stay with this story, because what appears to be a tragic accident is about to unfold into something deeply human and devastating. The first reaction came from the stairwell, where Anna, the neighbor who sold snacks at the corner shop, stood with her apron still knotted, eyes wet, and a phone clenched in her hand. Maria, the wife, gasped as Daniel crouched at the bedside and said, "Please, do not go. Please, do not leave me alone." Maria replied, "I am not ready to go. My voice keeps leaving me." Daniel answered with a short laugh that sounded like a hitch, "I called the ambulance. They are on their way. Calm down." Maria asked, "Why is your hand shaking?" Daniel said, "I am cold. My hand is cold, but I am here." Anna insisted, "We should not wait. I will fetch Dr. Mendez, who lives 2 doors down." Daniel protested, "No, wait. The elevator takes too long. I will carry her to the car." Anna grabbed his sleeve and said, "You cannot move her. Let the professionals handle it." Daniel pushed gently. "I know what I am doing. Trust me. I used to help my mother with wounds." Anna called out to Juliana across the landing, "Juliana, come help us with the towels." Juliana arrived panting. "What happened? What did you do?" Daniel answered, "It was an accident. We do not know. Please call someone." Juliana looked at Maria and whispered, "She is pale. She is leaving us." That exchange was raw and full of tactile detail. The cold of the sheets, the dampness of Maria's hair against the pillow, the metallic taste in Daniel's mouth as he repeated "please" over and over. Every voice in that narrow corridor became part of a chorus that would later be read like a script at an inquest. The first, accusations came wrapped in small factual fragments. A torn receipt from a private clinic lay on the kitchen table, half under a mug. A transfer notification on Daniel's phone showed a sum dated 3 days earlier with the name Sofia Mendez. In the hallway, Mrs. Rosa from apartment 3B said, "I saw him leave with a bag at midnight last week," and someone answered, "He has been different lately. He came home smelling of perfume." That combination of smell and numbers started a story that would not stop. The early backstory that surfaced was simple and heavy. Maria had grown up in a house where silence was the currency, learning to fold words away like laundry. Daniel had spent years trying to be seen as a provider and a quiet man who fixed radios and changed tires. Sophia, the woman whose name appeared on the bank record, had a past as a nurse who knew ways to make a person feel better and to hide the traces of late-night visits. Each revelation multiplied the tension. A social worker from the local ONG called Rosa and asked if the family needed emergency support. A neighbor uploaded a shaky video of Daniel running downstairs with a cardigan. The clip would later circulate as evidence and as proof of intent, depending on who watched it. Backstory for Maria was a slowly revealed 3-part portrait that explained why she tolerated so much and why the shock cut so deep. As a child, she learned to measure love not by loud declarations, but by the temperature of a cup of tea left on the table. Her mother died when she was 10, and the smell of chamomile and hospital sanitizer stayed with her like a map of loss. She studied accounting at night while working at the bakery during the day, learning numbers that felt safe because they rarely betrayed emotion. She married Daniel at 27 after a brief courtship that promised stability, a reliable partner who could carry groceries and name the lines of a tax form. In her 30s, she began to feel invisible. Small betrayals accumulated into a quiet loneliness that she called submission because without it, their rented apartment would not be theirs. The loss that shaped her was not a single event, but a pattern of being the one to forgive, to pick up paperwork for the neighborhood, to be the person who remembered birthdays. That history explains why she kept the envelope with the clinic receipt folded away, why she did not confront texts, and why, when her body finally betrayed her in a living room that smelled of coffee and detergent, she found her voice too late. Backstory for Daniel unfolded in parallel and was deliberately split into memory fragments to show the slow construction of a man who could make a choice that would haunt him. He was raised by a father who taught him to hide pain behind a smile, and by a sister named Juliana who always said, "Men cry less, but they feel more." Daniel learned mechanical skills early. He could fix a motor, and the rhythm of his hands seemed to steady fear. He worked as a delivery driver, learned routes, and collected small hours of loneliness that he tried to fill with company at night. When Sophia entered his life, it felt like warmth after a long rain. She listened to his jokes and told him he was good at small things, and he mistook attention for love. He started transferring small sums to her account to help with a supposed medical expense and told himself that secrets could be repairs, quick fixes that would not resist inspection. The decision that would define him came in a moment of panic, when Maria collapsed and his chest filled with a pressure that smelled of iron and possibility. He could call the ambulance and let truth and timing decide, or he could act in a way that protected what felt vital in the moment. That choice cracked the architecture of his life into fragments. Rumors multiplied, and the community named players. There was Pastor Raul, who comforted Maria's mother at the doorway and who later offered to mediate a confession. There was Dr. Mendez, who signed a short referral and whose name would be pulled into an audit. Officer Ricardo from the local precinct logged the first statement and made notes about the chain of custody for the phone and the receipt. Carla, the journalist from the neighborhood paper, posted a headline that read, "A lover, a transfer, and a tragedy," and then closed comments because the thread had turned cruel. Anna from the corner shop kept bringing warm soup to the waiting family, and Aline from the school took Maria's son on short notice to keep him away from cameras. Each secondary character was drawn toward an action that moved the narrative. Pastor Raul comforted, Dr. Mendez clarified medical timelines, Officer Ricardo secured evidence, Carla amplified the story, Anna fed the household, Aline protected the child. Their names would be spoken in the courtroom and in kitchen whispers, and each would have to explain why they had believed one story over another. At the first public confrontation in the community center, the dialogue became an instrument of accusation and denial, and it had the cadence of 11 voices circling a table. Daniel said, "I did everything I could." Maria said, "You left me alone." Pastor Raul asked Daniel, "Did you call for help in time?" Daniel answered, "Yes, but the response was late. The ambulance arrived after she had stopped breathing." Carla pushed, "Why was there a transfer of money to Sophia 3 days ago?" Daniel answered, "It was for a loan, a private favor, nothing to do with Maria." Officer Ricardo interjected, "We need to hear Sophia, we need her account." Sophia arrived, calm and composed. "I was helping Daniel with a personal debt. I did not want to lie." Juliana accused, "You lied to your wife for months." Anna said, "How can you be so cold? You left the door unlocked and a note on the table." Daniel whispered, I panicked, and I erased messages. I thought I had to protect something." Aline, who had been silent, said, "What about the receipt torn in the sink? Who washed it?" Daniel looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time and said, "I washed dishes, and maybe the paper came with them." The tension of that exchange was tactile, the rustle of paper, the scent of soup, the echo of shoes in the hall. This public scene seeded the legal process and hardened neighborly judgments. One mounting moment of tension was the discovery of the phone messages that would later anchor the accusation of intent. The file appeared as a screenshot on Carla's desk and then as printouts on a table in the police station. The messages were brief and ordinary, and then they were not. They showed Daniel texting Sophia at midnight while Maria slept upstairs. The exchange was a sequence of small, candid lines that, read consecutively, suggested a hidden relationship and a plan to move money. When Officer Ricardo confronted Daniel with the timestamps and the tiny heart emoji, Daniel could not look up. He said, "I did not think those messages would matter. I thought they were harmless." Sophia said, "We were not planning anything. We were only seeing each other." Juliana cried out, "You set your wife aside and then you left her when she needed help." Each line of the messages became a blade. Each read aloud was a fresh cut. The room smelled of printer toner and stale coffee and a new, metallic tension that felt like pre-trial silence. That moment lasted long enough for every person in the room to decide who they thought guilty and who they thought wronged. The first legally technical scene came in the hospital records and the laudo that would be pivotal. The clinical file recorded the time of the emergency call, the response time, and the initial assessment. A nurse named Beatrice signed an entry that read, "Respiratory arrest at 03:12. Resuscitation attempted, no return of spontaneous circulation." The chain of custody note for the phone and the receipt was logged by Officer Ricardo, who noted the transfer notification as a potential motive. In a brief forensics passage, Dr. Mendez described how a delay of 6 to 8 minutes in respiratory arrest can change the outcome by more than 50%. The document, accessed at the registry, noted that the ambulance arrival was at 07:08, not 06:58, as Daniel had first claimed. That discrepancy opened a series of revisions. The technical description of procedures included the steps of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, the oxygen protocol, and a mention of a possible allergic reaction ruled out by toxicology. A forensics lab reported presence of no illegal substances, and the laudo was precise, clinical, and cold in its language, and it would both exculpate and incriminate depending on testimony. At roughly 1/3 into this narrative, when the discovery of the transfer became public and suspicion hardened into accusation, take a moment to leave your reaction in the comments. If this story moved you, you are not alone. Tell us whether you think the neighborhood had the right to judge before the inquest, and start your reply with justice or compassion so others can see where you stand. Your words help others see different perspectives and guide how we cover stories like this. Now return with us to the instant the envelope appears again in evidence, and to the look on Daniel's face as the receipts pile on the table. The courtroom scenes were formal and intimate at once. Judge Ferreira called for order, and the room smelled of old wood and lemon polish. Daniel sat with his lawyer Marcos, who opened with a steady voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence must be considered with context." The prosecutor Ana Paula pushed, "We have bank transfers, messages, and contradictory statements about the ambulance call." Daniel whispered, "I did not set out to hurt her." Maria, present by video, said into the microphone, "I was alone for minutes that seemed like hours. I called and there was no answer." Sophia testified, "I helped him with money because he confided in me. I did not know about Maria's condition." Officer Ricardo presented the chain of custody and the laudo, and Dr. Mendez gave technical clarification about response times. Juliana read a letter written by Maria before she collapsed, a small plea for honesty. That exchange was heavy, and it had the density of legal language combined with small human ruptures. The judge asked Daniel, "Do you deny transferring money to conceal something?" He answered, "I do not deny the transfer, but I did not do anything to harm her." The courtroom contained soap scum of patients and the metallic scent of coffee from jurors who stayed late. Each statement bent the arc of the story a fraction, and the sum of fractions would decide the public verdict before the legal one. One detailed tension moment occurred in a private room where Daniel was asked to reenact the night. The description had to slow down and breathe. He sat and listed times and actions. He said, "I came home at 1:13. I made coffee. Maria was watching a show. She complained of a tightness in her chest." He described the sound of the kettle and the texture of the towel he used to pat a cool forehead. He admitted he had texted Sophia at midnight and had moved money to her account, but swore it was to help with a loan. In that room his hands trembled and he tasted copper and shame. The reenactment exposed small contradictions, a shift of a minute here, a new detail there, and the investigator watched for changes in breath and eye direction. The microtension created a sense of inevitability and dread, because when an ordinary life is depicted in slow motion, there is less to hide behind. That scene lasted in memory, like a recording that could be replayed during testimony to either break or save him. The descent into personal collapse came with a long monologue from Daniel late one night in custody. He spoke to no one and to everyone, the room smelling faintly of disinfectant and old paper. "I wanted to be good," he said. "I wanted to be necessary. I thought if I protected something, it would fix me. I thought a small lie could save us. I never imagined a choice would become a crime." He described the moment he decided not to call immediately, the thought of losing Sophia, the panic that felt like drowning and made him do things he could not later justify. The monologue ended with him repeating a short fractured sentence, like a prayer or an admission. "I let her go because I was terrified of losing what made me feel alive." That confession did not absolve him, yet it exposed the human calculus at the heart of the case. The technical review continued with a forensic accountant named Paulo, who traced transfers and noted percentages and timelines. He presented that the transfer to Sophia represented 20% of Daniel's monthly disposable income, a number that suggested regularity, not a one-off. He described the bank protocol, the verification codes, and the delay that might occur when accounts are from different institutions. The document trail included screenshots, timestamps, and an email thread where Sophia asked for help with a deposit slip. The chain of custody was explained carefully so that no claim of evidence tampering could stand without challenge. These precise descriptions of instruments and protocol made the case feel like a machine of facts, each cog examined and tested. Another major moment of tension appeared when a witness named Beatrice recounted the first view of the scene and the conflicting statements she had heard. She said, "There was blood on the cuff of a sleeve. There was a cup overturned. There was a faint smell of perfume." The prosecutor asked, "Did you see signs of a struggle?" She replied, "No, not exactly, but the room felt staged to be ordinary, and yet under it there was a strain, a misalignment." That testimony was brief but sharp and raised questions about intent and staging that both defense and prosecution mined for advantage. The room slowly filled with an expectation that a buried truth would surface if enough small facts lined up. The confession arc moved toward a partial admission during a mediated hearing at the parish where Pastor Raoul sat with the three central players. Daniel said, "I did not wake to a plan, I woke to fear, and the thought of losing everything I had built." Sophia said, "I did not ask him to choose her." Maria, fragile and steady, said, "I forgave once. I will try again, but I cannot forget." The mediated confession was not a legal plea, but an emotional fissure that changed neighbors more than judges. Afterward, Juliana organized a small fundraiser at Anna's shop to support Maria's recovery, and Aline petitioned the school to provide counseling for Maria's son. The final reversal came when a newly discovered message thread showed that Maria had, a week earlier, written to Daniel about a health scare and that he had promised to book a specialist. That message made some jurors reconsider timing and intent. Did he try to hide a failing marriage with transfers because he felt trapped, or had his panic that night been an ugly miscalculation rather than malice? The laudo remained central, and Dr. Mendez testified again about how fast events could shift. The judge, in a measured voice, said, "This case is not about simple blame. It is about choices made under pressure, and about how a community looks for meaning in the fragments left behind." One more tension moment arrived in a private letter read to the court by Juliana. The letter was Maria's, written while she was still in the hospital and feverish, and in it she asked for honesty and said that she would keep their son safe no matter what. The letter added a human weight to the evidence and was described for its texture: the slight smear of lipstick, the creased margin where a tear had fallen, the scent of hospital soap that clung to the paper. Reading it aloud created an intimacy that legal documents could not match. The letter shifted some opinions because it revealed Maria's enduring priority, the child, and her willingness to protect him even as she faced betrayal. That moment lasted like the hollow after a bell rings. In the weeks that followed, the community fractured but also responded with small acts. Anna, from the corner shop, set up a donation box that raised funds for Maria's medical care. Carla, the journalist, ran a follow-up piece that contextualized the transfer as part of a pattern of secrecy not unique to this household. Officer Ricardo continued to manage evidence and noted procedural improvements to the response protocol at the station. Dr. Mendez participated in a public seminar about emergency response times led by Pastor Raul. These actions showed that the story had consequences beyond the courtroom. 6 months later, the legal outcome had been mixed. The judge issued a ruling that acknowledged negligence in timing but did not find premeditated intent to kill. Daniel received a sentence focused on community service, mandatory counseling, and loss of parental custody rights pending a review. Sophia received no criminal charge but became a permanent figure of public ire. Maria, slowly recovering, moved into a smaller apartment closer to school and to Aline, who helped with childcare. The community organized a support collection, and the neighborhood association put forward a campaign to improve emergency response awareness. In the quiet that followed the case, small changes seemed significant. One last moment of tension unfolded when a coroner issued an addendum stating that an undetected cardiac condition likely contributed to Maria's sudden collapse. The wording was careful, and it did not erase moral responsibility for delays or lies, but it complicated the narrative of intent and guilt. The addendum described a congenital arrhythmia that could have led to a sudden arrest independent of external interference. The new sentence in the file sent ripples through the earlier accusations and forced some to reassess what they had assumed. 1 month after the verdict, Maria had moved into a small apartment painted a soft green and arranged by Aileen and Anna. She had a new job at the school cafeteria and went to therapy with a counselor named Rosa who ran a local support group. The neighborhood could see her on mornings walking to work with a thermos and the small stoop she kept for her son. Pastor Raul visited and brought soup while Dr. Mendez arranged follow-up cardiology appointments. The community voice softened in places, and 2 neighbors, Carla and Juliana, organized a mural at the corner to remind residents to watch for signs and to call first, judge later. Maria felt battered and relieved in turns and said, "I am trying to breathe again." The change was visible and practical: a steady job, a network of helpers, a reduced debt burden thanks to the fundraiser. That month closed with a small ritual at Anna's shop where people lit candles and promised a shared watchfulness. 3 months later, the case prompted a local initiative at the parish and the school to teach basic emergency response. A petition led by Aileen and supported by Pastor Raul collected signatures that convinced the local clinic to reduce ambulance response times on that route by 15%. Juliana started a neighborhood watch program focused on health emergencies. Maria's son received psychological support at the school, funded partly by Carla's reporting fund. Sophia volunteered at the clinic as a way to give back and to quiet the hostility in the streets, though many still refused to speak with her. Daniel continued therapy and community service and attended group sessions led by Marcos, the lawyer who tried to teach him accountability beyond legal consequences. These 3 months solidified new supports and revealed slow repairs in the fabric of community life. 6 months later, a small but concrete legacy had emerged. The neighborhood association had established a fund for emergency transport and first response training, named in memory of Maria and promoted by Aileen and Aileen. The campaign had led to a policy meeting at City Hall where Officer Ricardo and Pastor Raul testified about local needs. The mural at the corner had become a meeting point for families, and the school added a module on basic life support. Maria had regained partial custody after evidence of Daniel's steady participation in therapy and service, but their relationship remained severed and complex. She had enrolled in a part-time nursing assistant course supported by donations and by Dr. Mendez, who offered a scholarship. Daniel volunteered at the fund and participated in panels about choices and accountability. The community, once quick to assign blame, had repurposed its energy toward prevention and support. In the final reflection, Maria said, "I lost a way of living, but not my right to hope." The judge's ruling did not cure loss, but it opened a space for reconstruction. The neighborhood had not found a single truth it liked better. It had found many small truths that, stitched together, created change. If this story touched you, consider subscribing to follow updates on similar cases that balance human complexity and factual scrutiny. Here we bring narratives that mix emotion and evidence, and we invite a conversation that seeks repair, not spectacle. Share your thoughts below, and remember to start with justice or compassion so our community can see your perspective.